For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised.
That is by design, because as long as we're fighting against each other, then the powers that be can kind of do whatever they want. The agencies can go rogue and do what they want. If we're fighting each other over these personality wars, it's a distraction from what's really going on. Imagine if we were all talking about what's our worldview, what do we believe, why do we believe it?
Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the Jeff Dornik Show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Again, make sure you guys are subscribing on Rumble for the Jeff Dornik Show, but also you guys can now go over to look up Freedom First Network on Rumble as well. We're officially relaunching that along with my good friend, Robbie, who's going to be handling a lot of the day-to-day operations over there. So we're going to be relaunching Freedom First Network, bringing on a bunch of amazing shows. Everything from the OGs of like two mics with Dr. Michael Scheuer and Colonel Mike, all the way over to Battlefront Frontline, Bob and Eric Save America. Then a bunch of new shows like the Shannon Joy Show and the TMI Show and Deprogram and all that kind of stuff. So make sure that you guys are subscribing to Freedom First Network on Rumble, and we've got a whole host of shows that will be going live over there. One final thing as well before we go live, make sure you guys go over to supermassiveblackcoffee.com. Supermassiveblackcoffee.com, coffee company that I started, all organic coffee beans, gourmet, fire roasted in an antique Victorian era coffee roaster. So make sure you guys are going over there, order a bag today, use promo code Jeff at checkout. You guys will get 20% off over at supermassiveblackcoffee.com. Without further ado, we are bringing on our guest for today. We've got John Kiriakou. I always mispronounce your name. Your last name? Kiriakou. Yes. Welcome to the show. I'm glad we can sit down and chat for a bit. And I've been wanting to kind of pick your brain quite a bit as of late, just with everything going on. Because it seems like like I've had Dr. Michael Scheuer on my show, who's also former CIA.
Yes.
And it's interesting because I think you guys have somewhat different experiences, but then also you guys come to a lot of the exact same conclusions about what's going on in the world. Everything from the agencies to, should the CIA even exist anymore, to Israel. It's really wild when you think about it.
I sat 10 feet from Mike for quite some time in the Counterterrorism Center. He and I approach problems from extreme opposite perspectives. He from the right, I from the left. And we meet more often than not. We agree more often than not. I have deep respect for Mike Scheuer. I have from the very day that I met him. And I think that he was not just underestimated at the CIA, he was disrespected at the CIA's peril. Mike's a great American.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting because obviously, and I've seen it because it was interesting because we had two mics, which is his podcast on Freedom First Network that we launched back in, I think it was 2020, which is pretty crazy. And their show was a big reason why we got censored because he's out there talking about all these things, and we got labeled by Right Wing Watch, and everybody is far extremists and all that. And it's like now you're seeing everything that he talked about coming to fruition, especially with dealing with Iran and Israel and having a lot of those conversations. It's really interesting how it's like, there's certain people where they're talking and then you fast forward a couple of years and all of a sudden it's like they were proven right the entire time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And these are issues that we should be talking about. We should be questioning American foreign policy. Time was really until the mid 1990s where differences in foreign policy ended at the shore, right? As Americans, we spoke with one voice on foreign policy. That ended in the mid 1990s. And now we're beating each other up over foreign policy it makes the country weaker, and it shouldn't be happening.
Yeah. Well, so I think, and I think especially when it comes to what foreign policy, I feel like there's a lot of different angles that are all kind of attacking simultaneously. And obviously you've got, okay, Israel's influence over our politics, over our elected officials, our politicians. There's all, but then the question is that, okay, so there's a lot of times there's talk about Mossad, there's talk about CIA, who's involved, who's not overseeing, but who's influencing the other. Do you find that it's kind of mutually both are kind of combating with each other, or do you think that one is more influential than the other, especially when it comes to our involvement going on in the Middle East?
Oh yeah, I think the Israelis are far more influential in the United States than the United States is in Israel. In Israel, among the Israeli public, the United States, of course, is very popular, but the Israelis really chafe at what they feel is American intervention, especially in their politics. They really don't like it. They don't like to be told what to do, and they especially resent it when the United States or the U.S. government really doesn't fall into lockstep. They want our support, they want our money, they want subsidies, they want our weapons and our weapon systems, but they don't want to be told what to do. And frankly, we need to tell them more what to do.
Yeah. Well, and I think that this is where it's like there's the extremist conspiracy theories about Mossad, and then but and I think that some of them go way too far. But then there's also a certain amount of truth that's there. And one of the concerns that I have in a lot of these conversations that I'm seeing happening online is that it almost feels like certain people are taking things so far to the extreme on both ends, and then it kind of discredits the legitimate questions that there really are in regards to their involvement in a variety of angles.
Yeah, I mean, the truth of the matter is Mossad actively spies on the United States. They have dozens, more than hundreds of spies across the United States, mostly in American defense contractors, stealing American defense secrets. We give 99% of what we have in the defense industry to Israel, and they are out there stealing that last 1% that we're withholding from them.
Yeah, which is crazy when you think about it, and I think that it's like whether you're again with again, there's a variety of issues going on simultaneously, but it feels like there's definitely subversive forces that are happening behind the scenes. Whether you're talking Mossad, whether you're talking about our own agencies, you got the CCP that's dealing with a whole host of crap going on as well. And it's like, okay, so the American people elected President Trump to get in there and root out the deep state. I had Kash Patel on my show talking about government gangsters and doing all that, and then a lot of people, myself included, are sitting here like, okay, so when is this actually going to happen? And it's like, is it that the deep state is too deeply entrenched in the government that they can't be rooted out, or is it that these guys are compromising, or they never really intended to from the beginning? What's your assessment just from the outside looking in?
Where do you even begin, man? You just made me think about Kash Patel. I have been a supporter of Kash Patel's from the very beginning, and a friend of mine emailed me yesterday and said, "What do you say about Kash Patel now? He went snorkeling at the USS Arizona. That is a military cemetery." Yeah, he did. He went snorkeling at the USS Arizona. That's a very bad look. But it has nothing whatsoever to do with his work to prevent the weaponization of the federal government against political figures. That's what I care about.
Yeah.
I care about the FBI not being used as a cudgel to smash the heads of people who speak out against wrongdoing in government. So yeah, Kash Patel should not have gone snorkeling at the USS Arizona. But in the greater scheme of things, I don't care that he did. I want to know if he's at the FBI representing the Constitution and ensuring that the FBI is not used as a weapon against whistleblowers.
Yeah. Well, so how do you feel that he's been handling everything in the FBI? Because I've talked to some people where they've completely given up on somebody like Kash Patel leading the FBI, and they said that like literally he should not be the head of the FBI because clearly he's either compromised or like something's going on. The other side is that, you know, maybe he's secretly working behind the scenes and he can't publicly come out and say all the things that he's doing, but he's really doing a phenomenal job. And it's just we gotta be patient and trust the plan and all that kind of stuff. Where do you fall on all of that kind of stuff?
You know what, to tell you the truth, Jeff, I don't think I've come to a conclusion yet. I'm trying really hard to separate these personal foibles
Right.
with overall policy. It appears that he's got a drinking problem. It appears that he has inappropriately used government resources to support his girlfriend. You know, free government plane trips, for example. But I keep telling myself that there's a greater good here, and the greater good is not allowing the FBI to be used as a weapon, like it was used against me. And so I'm still hoping for the best. My friends complain that I am overly optimistic about life, and that's okay. I'll take that. I'll accept it. But I'm willing to give the guy the benefit of the doubt and see what it is that he can accomplish.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I think that for me the way that I oftentimes look at things is that yes, there could be all different kinds of things that happen, and things take a lot longer than I think people want it to take. I think we think they can just go in there and they can just fix it all. I think for me, where I begin to get concerned is I feel like sometimes we're being gaslit by our own government. We're being gaslit by Kash Patel and Bongino telling us that, well, clearly the evidence shows us that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, and we're going to release this video, and then the video doesn't really show us. It's like, why are you gaslighting us as opposed to just saying we don't know, or we're investigating or something along those lines? I think that's, to me, where the red flags start going up, and I'm like, okay, what's going on here?
Yeah, it's like they're winging it. You know, when that video was released, as an example, there's a second where there's just a blip, a momentary blip in the video, and then people are like, "Oh my God, there's a blip in the video. It was edited." Actually, no. All the cameras in the Bureau of Prisons reset themselves every 24 hours. That's what the blip was. So why didn't they just explain that? Say, listen, at X time, you're going to see a little blip in the video. What that is the camera resetting itself, for its 24-hour cycle. Just be transparent about it. But I agree with you. Don't say we're going to go in there and we're going to drain the swamp and we're going to clean it out when you can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah.
It's just not possible.
Right. Well, and I think that I think is the real question is, can our corrupt government, where the swamp is basically created their own system that's clearly not guided by the United States Constitution. It's not guided by protecting our constitutional rights. It's keep people in power, run the show secretly, subversively, the whole deal. It's like, can it be reformed? Or is it just so far gone that it's irreformable?
I think it actually can be reformed. But what we need to reform it is a period like we saw in the mid-1970s with the creation of the church and Pike committees, where there's got to be this national consensus that we're in a state of crisis. Donald Trump, whether you like him or you don't like him, was right when he said that we've got a swamp and the swamp needs to be drained, and that the swamp is run by swamp creatures, and these creatures are in government forever and they never leave. All of that was true. But we need this national consensus to change the actual structure of government, and we're just not there.
Yeah.
We're not there. It's not like people are appointing the likes of Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer et al. Are elected. They're elected because the people in those states and those districts want them as their representatives. We have to get beyond that to a point where people are thinking about the country as a whole entity, not just in your specific state or your specific district. And we're just not there.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of that comes back to, this two-party political, not even just system, but I think the mindset that people have is in that it's, you know, it's party politics. We have to support our team. And for me, the way that I look at it as well is that, you know, I've traditionally always voted Republican. I'm conservative, Christian, like the whole deal. However, you know, what I've been seeing, especially I think post Trump getting into office, one of my concerns is that I'm seeing the Republican Party, and we've seen this one on the Democrat Party too, is that positions that they held a couple of years ago, now they've done a 180 and hold a completely different position, and it's the exact same people. And I'm not even talking the politicians, like my friends that are just random people walking down the street. They have a completely different worldview than they did 5 years ago just because their party flipped positions. It's really crazy, like how they've been able to get away with that. And I think that that's part of the problem of how do you get consensus and how do you get people upset at the system enough to you know, reform it?
Oh yeah, yeah. We're talking about you, Lindsey Graham, John Fetterman. Yes, indeed. Yeah. Oh my God. You know, every once in a while in a wave election, these guys are just swept out. We saw it in 1974, in 1980. We saw it again in 1994. We need another wave election, one way or the other, where these guys are just swept out and we can start fresh. We also, you know, have been the victims nationally of some very, very poor Supreme Court decisions. Citizens United was the worst Supreme Court decision of our generation. That finding that corporations are people and that corporations thus can donate unlimited amounts of money. Okay, so you just allowed corporations to buy America's democracy. That's it. It's a corporate democracy. Plain and simple. Telling people that it doesn't really matter what your vote is because hundreds of millions, billions of dollars of corporate money is going to be spent to sway elections. So we don't really care what you think. Terrible, terrible decision. You know, a couple of times, political figures like Russ Feingold and John McCain, for example, when they had McCain-Feingold, had that was a real effort to even the playing field and to make government more responsive to the American voter. And it passed, and it was signed into law, and the Supreme Court threw it out in Citizens United. So I think we're really stuck in the mire and the muck right now, and there's no way out. And there's no way out because we're so divided politically as a country.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we are, and it's like while we're all fighting ourselves, it's like the powers that be are just, you know, going rogue and doing whatever the heck they want to a certain degree. And I think that this is where it's like when I don't even think that we have really officially a consensus on who is the deep state, just based on a lot of the conversations that I've had, which is, it's like, how do we fix the problem if we can't even address who it is? Because it's like, you know, depending on who you talk to, it's, you know, some people say there's 13 families that run the whole world. Other people say it's the intelligence agencies that are gone rogue and they're running the show and everything. And then, you know, one of the things that I woke up to, because I left Team Trump in the last presidential election and backed RFK Jr. when he was running. And one of the things that Kennedy kept talking about, obviously, was the agencies, but then also the corporate capture that's going on simultaneously as well. And it seems like the swamp is multifaceted. And I think that that's what makes it that much more difficult to figure out how do we actually fix this, because there's multiple different variations of what's really going on and who's calling the shots.
Yeah, I think that's right. And think of it this way, and this is specific to the CIA, but you can carry it across government. Government has something called the Senior Executive Service. At the CIA, it's called the Senior Intelligence Service. At the Commerce Department, it's the Senior Commercial Service. At State, it's the Senior Foreign Service. It's the executive level above the GS, 1 through 15 grades. Those senior executives are going to be in government for 30, 35 years, in some cases 40 years. Presidents come and go every 4 years or every 8. And these people are there forever. And you can't fire them because of the Civil Service Act. And they're the ones that run government. And if a president orders something that they don't like or they don't want to do, they just ignore him. And they know that they can slow roll it or they can wait him out. and he won't be president after a while. And then they'll just hope for the best with the next guy.
Yeah. So then what can we do in this scenario where it's like, okay, it when you think about it, it doesn't matter who the president is. It's like if the deep state and the bureaucracy doesn't agree with them, they can just kind of either ignore it, like you said, slow walk it, the whole deal. What can be actually done then?
I think what we need to do is, I think the president needs to sign an executive order, essentially saying that the policy is the policy, and the policy will be carried out post haste as soon as it is determined and signed by the president. And that, and this is an important second part, once that policy is determined and signed, if it is not carried out, there will be sanctions. And then carry out those sanctions. And we don't do that. We've never done that.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I think, and again, I think there's constantly the question of why don't the presidents take on the bureaucracies, especially the agencies, whether you're talking about the departments within the DOJ or the CIA or things like that. It feels like Trump was the first one that really started talking about and being at odds with the CIA, probably since JFK that I can think of.
Yes. Agreed.
But when push comes to shove, it seems like there hasn't been the meaningful steps in order to counter them. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. There was a real move to reform, in the direction of reform, 1975, 76, with the advent of the Church and Pike committees. Those morphed into the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, which were supposed to be the oversight committees, which are the oversight committees. They really were the oversight committees for about 7 years. And then under Ronald Reagan, and during the period now known as Iran-Contra, they became really little more than cheerleaders for the CIA. And it's just gotten worse ever since, to the point where they don't really oversee anything. They just rubber stamp everything, and they provide a budget. Whatever the agencies want, the agencies get, and nobody pays any kind of price for wrongdoing.
Yeah. Which I think is obviously really frustrating to a lot of us, where we're like, okay, you'll bring in the head of the CIA and ask questions, at these Senate hearings or things like that, but then they basically say they can't answer it, and then what happens? They basically just kind of like let it go, and it goes about, and they get their quick hit for social media posts, and then they move on with their day. And I think that's what I think is what's frustrating, because there's a lot of legitimate questions that like everyday Americans have about what's going on. Feels like there's no transparency. And I get, on one hand, you've got national security stuff, but then on the other hand, not everything can be national security. And it's kind of like who works for who here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, we're going to have to make some hard decisions, starting at the very top and working their way down. And we just haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think that really it to me, it feels in the sentiment of people that I talk to, it feels like the whole Epstein case seems to be that thing that's really waking a lot of people up to, okay, they're like, this is a lot more corrupt than I think even just everyday people thought. And it feels like a cover up going on. But then the question becomes, who's orchestrating the cover up? Why are they orchestrating the cover up? And I mean, if they even are, because it's like, you talk to some people, they're covering up for Mossad. Other people, they're covering up for the FBI. Other people, they're covering up for the CIA. And everybody was involved in this, but who was actually involved and why? And like, it just feels like I don't even know if we're ever going to get straight answers on this thing.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I was talking to my friend Scott Horton the other day. Scott is, one of the country's leading libertarian thinkers, absolutely brilliant analyst. And he was saying, we were talking about the Israeli nuclear program. Well, I'm a private citizen, and my position is that, of course, Israel has a nuclear program. But the United States government does not admit that Israel has a nuclear program. The Israelis certainly don't admit that they have a nuclear program, but everybody on the planet knows that they do. And the conventional wisdom is that they have between 120 and 220 nuclear weapons, nuclear missiles. I have a friend a former boss of mine at the CIA, who wrote a book, a historical book on looking at foreign policy of the 1950s. And the only sentence, the only phrase that was redacted by the CIA was Israeli nuclear program. Well, why is it up to us to protect the fact that the Israelis have a nuclear program? I can tell you why. Because we have a law in this country called the Glenn-Symington Act, written by Senators John Glenn and Stuart Symington. And it says that the United States is not permitted to provide aid of any kind to any country that has a nuclear program and is not a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Well, the only country in the world that meets those criteria is Israel.
Yeah.
But so long as the Israelis don't admit that they have a nuclear program, and we don't admit that the Israelis have a nuclear program, we can just pretend that they don't and continue to give them billions and billions of dollars in aid. We need to clean up our act, because that is not just disgraceful, it's dishonest, and it's unfair to the American taxpayer.
Yeah. Well, so what is, and I get it from the propaganda side of the you've got the Zionists that are constantly, we've got to support Israel. I get that side of things because I come out of the evangelical world and I've seen it. I grew up in it.
Sure.
I get that side of things. But what's the motivation for our government? What's the motivation for our deep state, for lack of a better word, on supporting Israel and looking the other way, like you said, on this specific law, not admitting what everybody knows is true in order to keep sending the money? What's the motivation from that standpoint?
You know what? It's a completely political decision. It's not that, the intelligence community decides we're going to support Israel and we drag the politicians along with us. That is absolutely false. It is that the politicians have decided we will support Israel no matter what. And they've dragged the government along with them. That's what it is. It's a completely political decision that was made during the Nixon administration to guarantee Israeli security.
Yeah. Well, but then now it's now this one issue is dividing the country, unlike anything that I've seen. Because it's usually a lot of these states of division happen by party line, and this is something. It's split the Democrat Party, it's split the Republican Party, and it's creating these different factions, which I think to a certain degree could be potentially good, because I think that we need more than just a two-party system to where you have different factions that can negotiate and all that kind of stuff. I don't necessarily think it's going to play out that way. But it's really interesting how it's dividing both parties from that standpoint. And the question is that will our government continue down this path with how divided our country is, or are they just going to continue to dig their heels in and go Israel, Israel, Israel?
Yeah, I think that we are still stuck in the Israel, Israel, Israel policy. Yes. Mm-hmm. I agree with you. This is not a partisan issue. In fact, this is an issue on which the left and the right can agree and can work together. I follow a lot of both left-wing and right-wing commentators, and we agree that we need to worry about our country. We need to worry about the United States. Why do the Chinese have trains that go 350 miles an hour? How come why I can't get on a train that goes 350 miles an hour? How come the Chinese roads and bridges are first class, first world, and ours are full of potholes, or the bridges are falling down into the rivers below them? Why are our airports second class, second world airports? I'm embarrassed. Every time I fly into someplace like Miami or JFK or Newark, I'm embarrassed by the condition of these airports. Why? Because we send our money to Israel and we send our money to DOD, and we spend more than the next 9 largest countries combined in terms of defense budget. And the Chinese are perfectly content to sit back and watch us destroy ourselves. So this is something on which the right and the left agree, that it should be America first. We should be focused on the best interests and the welfare of the American people, and let other countries worry about themselves.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think a perfect example of that. I remember, several years ago, my wife and I went down to Mexico, and we had a layover in Mexico City. We're like, this airport is flipping nice. I
It's
mean,
great.
compared, like I'm out here in California, where it's like we have LAX, and it's like this thing makes us look like a third world country
Yes,
while
it
we're
does.
actually in a third world country, which is crazy. But I think as well, it's like with all of this, it feels like the argument that we're getting out of the Trump administration, who obviously they ran with, America first, America first, America first. It feels like that's morphed. It started out back in 2015, 2016 as the definition of America first is Americans first, right? And I remember I bought President Trump's book when he first came out with it, with laying out his policy. It was very much about the everyday person, the blue collar worker. How do we help Americans? It feels like now that's morphed into America first as the entity and the country, and not necessarily Americans first. And I think that that's indicative in President Trump's response to Iran,
Yeah.
of saying, I basically don't care about Americans and their finances, because we've got to focus on our safety as a country. You look at
Yeah.
what's happening with China. We're going to, have China invest $1 trillion into our country, send 500,000 of their students to our universities. Now, you can make the argument that maybe you can argue and twist that into it's putting America first because it keeps our universities open. But is that what's best for Americans? And I think that is where a lot of people are starting to wake up to the fact of, are we agreeing on the same definition of what this even means?
No, clearly we're not. I always get a chuckle when I hear about these deals where the Chinese are going to do this or the Chinese are going to do that. They're going to invest in the country. They're already the third largest holder of treasury bonds. So our economies are intertwined, right? We have to work together. But what gives me a chuckle is when the Chinese are always committing to sending hundreds of thousands of students, mostly at the master's and PhD level. Okay, that's not necessarily a good thing.
Right.
And I'll tell you why. Most of those Chinese students are students in the hard sciences or computer sciences, right? And they are here to either absorb or steal as many American tech secrets or scientific secrets as they possibly can and take them back to China, or get a PhD in the United States, remain in the United States, and then report back to Chinese intelligence what they're learning here. So it's not necessarily this wonderful thing that we have 500,000 new Chinese students at universities all across the country. Next thing you know, they're going to be applying for jobs in sensitive labs or working in nuclear technologies or working in the defense industry and reporting back to the Chinese intelligence service.
Yeah. Well, and especially with their track record too, because it's like, again, I live out here in California. We just had one of our mayors out here in Arcadia, California,
Yes.
arrested as basically an agent of China to push propaganda as the mayor of the city. And you're like, did Trump bring this up to China when he goes over there? I highly doubt that. But I guarantee you, if they arrested one of their mayors who for being basically a spy on behalf of America, it would have just been the end of the world. And it's like, what? Nobody's going to say, like, you actually had a mayor working for you? That's crazy. And then I remember as well, and we did a lot of investigation into this. We didn't fully release the information. But back in during COVID, when COVID first started, all of the numbers that were highly overinflated for COVID-19, all the major news outlets were citing the same source. And it was this website that was calculating all the information aggregate across the country and stating, okay, this is how many cases, deaths, all that kind of stuff. And it was highly, highly inflated, but every single mainstream media news outlet cited it. And it was run by these two college students that were from China that had come over. They were in Nevada, and you're just sitting here and you're like, okay, so every single news outlet is relying on two students' website. Where did they come from? They came from China. Where did the virus come from? China. Does nobody see maybe there's something sinister going on here?
Jeff, I'll draw a parallel. There are two human rights organizations, one based in London, one based in Washington, that give us numbers of Iranian protesters killed in Iran. They are both funded by the Israeli government, and neither one of them has any presence in Iran.
Yeah.
And my God, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, Fox, they all grab these numbers from these phony human rights organizations funded by the Israelis, and they're the ones that convince American policymakers to go to war in Iran. It's the same idea.
Yeah. No,
There's no vetting of the information.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where, again, it's like, on one hand, it's like we don't want to be so isolationist and just like, okay, we're not going to be involved anywhere. But then it just feels like we're so involved and we're so spread out and we're relying on so many foreign interests in this country that how can anybody think that that's good for our national security? And I think that's the hard part, is that, when Trump was running for office, it was very much, opposed the globalist system, opposed globalism. But now it seems like we're expanding that reach, and things. I'm getting the sentiment from a lot of people that it feels like things are more corrupt now than ever before. The question then, though, is that are we just realizing it now, or is it actually more corrupt than it was before?
No, I think we're just realizing it.
Yeah,
this has been the case for many decades, and it's funny too, because you would have thought that Watergate would have permanently changed Americans' view of their own government. It did for a little while, not long. 6 years after Nixon resigned, Ronald Reagan became president, and everybody was gung-ho again. But this has been going on a long time, and people generally just kind of fall into place, and they do as they're told.
Yeah. Yeah, which again, I think it's the easy path, and I think a lot of people, they don't want to believe that there's conspiracies, like real life conspiracies, that are happening behind the scenes. But I think it's interesting. The more that I'm always somebody that I always tell everybody, it's like, I'll entertain any conspiracy theory that somebody has, but I'm going to need some evidence in order to take the next step, kind of a thing.
Yes.
But it seems like, and I think my conclusion oftentimes is, I don't know what actually happened, but I know it's not what we were told. Whether you say it was about the JFK assassination, MLK, 9/11, Epstein, it seems like all these major things that have really defined our country and these major catastrophic events, it feels like they're all predicated on either a lie or a partial truth. And everybody tries to act like they know exactly what happened. And I feel like I don't think any of us actually know what actually happened, but I can tell you it's not what they told us.
Mm-hmm. I think that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And we should be worried about it.
Yeah.
We should be worried about it, because God knows we're not getting any satisfaction from our elected officials on Capitol Hill. I worked on Capitol Hill, both on the House side and on the Senate side, in senior positions. And I can tell you that most elected officials don't care one whit what their constituents think about these issues. Now, if you're a constituent and you write and you say, please support, a resolution to honor the bald eagle as the national bird. Okay, sure, they do that. But if you write and say, listen, Israel's committing genocide in Gaza, and Israel suckered us into a war with Iran, please oppose, further assistance to Israel, they're going to laugh at you. They're going to laugh at you, and they're going to ignore you, everything that you say.
Yeah. Well, and specifically with what's going on in Gaza as well, I think that that's the thing. It seems like both sides of that fight, it's irreconcilable, right? Because like one side says it's 100% genocide, and they're trying to wipe out the entire population. Then you've got the other side, which is like, no, this is just self-defense, and it's like there is no middle ground. So like what's your explanation and your rationale for justifying that there is a genocide happening in Gaza? Because I think it's really important that we define the terms when we're talking about that.
Yeah, I mean there are legal definitions of genocide, which of course the Israelis are meeting. You can't have as a policy to just kill everybody. That's what genocide is. That's exactly what the Jews experienced during the Second World War. You can't have as a policy to destroy all the hospitals. You can't have as a policy to destroy 90% of the homes. The homes aren't a threat to you. The hospitals aren't a threat to you. You can't just destroy them. Even before the war began, Gaza only had 2 hours of water and 5 hours of electricity a day. Not because there wasn't enough water or electricity, but because the Israelis would just simply shut it off. And the Gazans got to the point where death was preferable to continuing to live like that. You know, and Donald Trump said something early on in this conflict that was very, very disturbing. He said that Gaza could be Monte Carlo. No, it could be better than Monte Carlo. What he meant was once we get rid of all the Palestinians and we can steal their land and develop it and make it look like Monte Carlo. That's the definition of ethnic cleansing.
Yeah.
You can't do it. It's illegal.
Right. Yeah. Well, and again, it's like when you're dealing with this, it's like it's not even like President Trump seems to be covering that up. He's just out and out saying it, which is absolutely crazy to me.
Yeah.
And I think that this is also like looking at all these issues. It seems like there's so many of these, you know, quote unquote, not conspiracy theories, but like the alternate theories on a lot of these major catastrophic events that I was talking about earlier, that all seem to hinge around Israel, and they all seem to be coming to a head right now with what's happening in the Middle East, whether you're talking about Gaza and Iran. And, you know, it's like, you know, whether you're talking about, you know, Jeffrey Epstein, it's like, okay, so if we're going to cover that up, it's like, okay, there's legitimate questions as to why. Is it that, you know, we're covering up for Mossad and they were using him to blackmail? Are we covering up for the CIA and our agencies because they were using him to blackmail world leaders to get them to do their bidding? And how does that correlate with what's going on in Israel? And I think the same thing happens with, you know, even like the JFK assassination. It's like,
Right.
Why are they slow walking that? Why aren't they actually releasing all the information? Why are they giving us a haystack with the needle that's pulled out of it? Like, you know, what is going on here? And it just seems like they all seem somewhat interconnected, even though I don't necessarily know what that interconnectedness is.
Yeah, in fact, the CIA raided Tulsi Gabbard's office a few days ago. Let me repeat that. The CIA, which is not a law enforcement organization, raided the office of the Director of National Intelligence, for whom they work, and seized 40 boxes of classified documents that apparently were being reviewed for declassification. Now, by all accounts, those documents included documents related to the JFK assassination. I have it on good authority from a friend of mine at the White House who told me that the president had not declassified the remaining 10 to 15,000 pages of Kennedy assassination documents because every page of them pointed directly at Israel. And it wasn't worth upsetting the balance of the relationship.
Yeah. And again, well, and this I think is the crazy thing to me is that I think it was Judge Napolitano. He did a show after Trump got out of office the first time, and he told the story that he called up Trump right in his last days while he was in office. He was like, "There's one promise you didn't make, and it was you didn't release the JFK files." And he's like, well, if you would have seen what I saw, you wouldn't release it either. And it's like, okay, so then you claim that you've released all the documents. There's nothing there that would warrant that kind of reaction. And so I think it's like, is it that it's Israel's involvement? Like is that really what the cover up is all about?
It has to be. Unless it was space aliens who came down and killed Kennedy, and you don't want to panic the public. Yeah. My belief is that it was some sort of Israeli involvement.
Yeah. So it's like, so if Israel was involved in the assassination of our president, allegedly Israel and or Mossad was involved with, you know, Epstein, like allegedly they were involved with a whole host of things that would be under any other circumstance an act of war against our country, why do we continue to act as if Israel is our number one ally in the entire world?
Because this is the political effect that the Israelis have. They are such great politicians. They are such great lobbyists. They are at every level of government. They're embedded on Capitol Hill. They're in the state legislatures. They're even working on local races like school boards, for example. They're at every level. And so they don't want anybody elected to any office that is going to question Israel.
Yeah. And we're seeing the effect of that happening right now with the Thomas Massey primary. Because when you're looking, I've got a lot of friends that are out there campaigning for him right now, and it's really interesting talking to a lot of them, because when you actually sit down and you think about Thomas Massey, I don't think that anybody could argue that he's not a conservative, that he's not a principled constitutionalist and all of that. Like, he votes with President Trump more than 90% of the time. And even the things that he votes against President Trump, the vast majority of them, most conservatives would agree with him. So it's like, why the outrage? Why are they dropping $30 million to unseat him? And the only justification that I can see is he opposes the way that we're going about our relationship with Israel. He opposes our foreign interventionist wars. He opposes sending money to Israel. And it's clear to me that the Israel lobby is trying to unseat him. And that to me, this to me is like black and white. Like, I don't see any other justification for it, because his record should not support treating him as if he's like Liz Cheney and a rhino.
Yeah, and we should say we're recording this on what day is today? Tuesday the 18th. Is that right?
Monday the 18th.
Monday.
Tomorrow's the
Monday
primary.
the 18th.
Yep.
Yeah, and tomorrow's the primary. So it's crunch time. You know, we're really going to get to see. But let me say a couple things about Thomas Massey. I actually know Thomas Massey. I don't know him terribly well, but he's a baseball fan. I'm a baseball fan. My dear friend and attorney Bruce Fine is a baseball fan. And so Bruce has season tickets to the Washington Nationals. We go to half a dozen games a year. Oftentimes he'll invite Massey, and Massey often comes to the games. Absolutely lovely guy. Not a malicious hair on his head, but he stands up for what he believes in. And he's very much, like, ideologically an America firster.
Right.
And he really believes it. He really feels America first. And America first is exactly the opposite of what the Israel lobby wants. They want Israel first. America can be co-first, but it's going to be America and Israel both first.
Yeah.
And that's not Massey. Massey is being opposed by a guy. He's a retired, like, Navy SEAL, I think is what it is, or some special forces kind of thing. A guy by the name of Ed Gallrain.
Yeah.
And Ed Gallrain, is an attractive candidate. Ed Gallrain would be a solid candidate in 100 different districts across America. But I'm really hoping he loses this one.
Yeah. No, me too. And I think as well, it's like, when we're looking at, being America first, I can't think of anybody that represents that more than Massey, at least the people that are in Congress and all that. And I think because, he's fighting for transparency in all these different issues, whether you're talking about Epstein, whether you're talking about J6, whatever it is, he's pushing for transparency. And I think that that's something that, especially with this administration, and I would argue this Congress specifically, nobody's fighting for that. And I think that's what's frustrating. And I think another perfect example of this is the handling of the attempted assassination on Trump and the actual assassination on Charlie Kirk. It feels like those investigations were not actual investigations. There's legitimate questions as to is there foreign involvement. And it's like, why can't we just be transparent and honest about these things? And if you're not, it puts a red flag up that maybe somebody's lying.
Yeah, I have to agree. And I'll ask you a semi-rhetorical question. Why is the FBI involved in the Charlie Kirk case? Why?
Yeah.
This kid that's accused of the shooting is from Utah. He left his home in Utah to drive to Charlie Kirk's location in Utah. He allegedly fired the shot while in Utah and then fled back to his home in Utah. So that is a state case, Utah State Police. Why in the world is the FBI involved? There's literally no federal aspect to this case whatsoever. All I can think of is that they're there to help to fudge the issue and cover things up.
Yeah. It's a great point, and I hadn't thought about it that way, but it makes perfect sense. It was really interesting because after what happened with Charlie Kirk, I got a call from a buddy of mine who has ties to intelligence and things like that, and he just flat out told me he's like, it feels like both the Trump attempted assassination and the Charlie Kirk assassination, it was the exact same playbook. Is the exact same type of kid, exact same security breach of they didn't check the roof and they allowed this to happen, like the exact same playbook. It seemed like happened with both the Trump assassination and Charlie Kirk's attempted assassination. It was really interesting. After Trump's assassination, Benjamin Netanyahu came out almost immediately and accused Iran of trying to do it.
Yeah.
And you're just sitting here and you're like, okay, so why would Iran have done that back then? I get now, if that would have happened now, I get, them do it. But back then, you really think that Iran was trying to unseat Trump when he was just running for office? I kind of doubt that. But if it's the same, if it's the same playbook, you would argue it's the same people behind it. And I don't think that anybody would think that Iran would be trying to take out Charlie Kirk. So then who would be motivated to do something like that?
It could have been what has been presented to us, a couple of nuts. It could have been the Israelis. I have to admit, I got a chuckle when Benjamin Netanyahu came out and said, "We didn't kill Charlie Kirk." Well, nobody accused you of killing Charlie Kirk. Okay, thank you for making that statement. It's odd,
Right?
but methinks he doth protest too much. So I'm also disappointed, and I get that the wheels of justice move slowly, but I'm disappointed that there have been no briefings, there have been no updates. We don't have any idea what's going on in this case. Yeah. No idea at all.
In either of those cases, really. Like
either one of them. No.
You're literally talking about a president of the United States there was an attempt on his life in front of everybody. He was actually struck by the bullet. And you're telling me that how many years are we now after that? And there's no information about that. There's no press conference from Kash Patel or Pam Bondi or anything like that of we've got an update for you. We just discovered this. Nothing. Yeah.
Nope. They haven't said a word.
Yeah. It's just crazy. And I think that this is where it's like, okay, so if we're getting this kind of, stonewalling from this administration, it's like, okay, I think a lot of people are becoming more and more black pilled as time goes on, unfortunately. And I think a lot of people are kind of giving up hope that we can reform, the agencies, reform the corruption of our government, all of that. What do you say to those people? Do you think that they're justified, or what path or what course of action should we be taking?
Honestly, we need major upheaval in Congress. We have to just wholesale throw the bums out. We need one of these watershed elections, like I mentioned earlier, because the status quo just simply isn't working. And again, it doesn't matter what the party is. Everybody's got to be thrown out. There's got to be something else like term limits, that would forbid this entrenchment that we see. And this wealth generation that we see on Capitol Hill. It's utterly unacceptable, but we're not really going to have change until the status quo is flipped on its head.
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting for me because I think specifically when it comes to term limits, I think there's a legitimate argument for that. But I also think that I think that I could see possibly even more corruption, very similar to how the president, it's like their first term they do great, the second term they can kind of go rogue and do whatever they want because they have no more accountability. To me, I almost feel like instead of term limits, I think we should take the Senate back to being selected by the states, so that way Congress, which is how our founders originally intended it. Congress was elected by the people, Senate's elected by the state, and then that way you have two different interests that are actually negotiating with each other, as opposed to a pure democracy, really, of both. But then,
you're not. But then you're not accounting. But then you're not accounting for state legislative gerrymandering.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, for example, in the state of North Carolina, you've got a state that's about 54-46 Republican, 52-48 Republican, but the Republicans have 67% of the legislative seats.
Yeah.
Sending it back to the state legislatures doesn't work.
Yeah, that's fair. And and I think also, like, one of the biggest things that I've noticed, especially being involved in supporting different people running for Congress, is like they carry over of money from previous campaigns to that just keeps incumbents in. Like you said earlier, the corporate money that's thrown in, the PACs, there's so much money, and then you've got the GOP where and the Democrats in general, they'll select their candidate. They put all of their money behind them in the primaries. Don't even allow the people to have a voice. Don't allow them to hear differing perspectives. And it's just, we just got to get our guy through. To me, it just seems like the whole election system is rigged, both from the governmental standpoint as well as from the party system. Yeah, totally.
And don't get me started on the Democratic primaries too. The Democrats have these super delegates. This is something the Republicans don't have. And I apologize, I have to go right into another podcast in 3 minutes. But the Democrats nominated George McGovern for president in 1972. McGovern was the weakest candidate that the Democrats could have nominated. But he was nominated because he was the anti-war candidate. He was the most honest guy. Bob Kennedy called him the most decent man in the U.S. Senate. But he was a loser, and he lost 49 of the 50 states. The Democrats were determined that would never happen again. And so they instituted this policy of superdelegates. So if you're a Democratic elected official, you're a governor, a congressman, a senator, a state office holder, this guy, that guy, the other guy, you're automatically a delegate. Well, then you end up with states like Wyoming or West Virginia, where Bernie Sanders beats Hillary Clinton 60-40 and doesn't win a single delegate. Not a single one. So the fix is in for the Democrats. You're either the inside guy, right? Or you don't have a prayer.
Yeah.
And that's not democracy.
No, I 100% agree. It's bonkers that that's allowed. In closing, because I know you got to go, tell everybody how they can tune into your show, follow you, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, thank you. I've got one podcast going right now and one that's coming very soon. The one that's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify is called John Kiriakou's Dead Drop. I'm so blessed. It's immensely popular. There's 6 million podcasts in the world, and I'm ranked number 238. And I'm very, very proud of that. So that's John Kiriakou's Dead Drop on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And in early July, we're launching on YouTube a podcast called John Kiriakou's Briefing Room. That will be twice a week. Go to Real John Kiriakou on YouTube and hit subscribe. I would appreciate it.
Perfect. I'll have the links in the show notes. People just click on that and do that. But I appreciate you coming on. It was a blast getting to pick your brain a little bit.
Thank you, Jeff. So good to see you. Thank you.
You as well. Thank you. And then everybody else as well. Make sure you guys are going over, subscribe to his podcast, and do all that as well. I'll have the links in the show notes again. And then in closing as well, make sure you guys are going over to pickaxe.com. You guys can get the app in the iOS App Store or the Google Play App Store as well. Download that. Experience what a true algorithmically free social media platform is like. Also coming up on June 13th, we're going to be down in San Diego at the Switchfoot Bro-Am. Come hang out with us. It's a concert on the beach. It's going to be, surf contest, the whole deal. We are sponsoring with Pickaxe, the VIP pit. We're also going to have a booth, hang out, you know, all that kind of stuff. A bunch of the OAN hosts are going to be coming down and hanging out with us as well. So make sure that you guys are doing that. And then in closing as well, go over to supermassiveblackcoffee.com, supermassiveblackcoffee.com. Use promo code Jeff at checkout. You guys get 20% off. Oh, and also, we actually just launched a Pickaxe merch store. So if you guys want Pickaxe merch, we got hats, shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, the whole deal. You guys can go over to pickaxe.shop, and you guys can go over there and get your Pickaxe merch. So that is it for today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I truly, truly appreciate it. We shall catch you guys next time.